Okay, so your Milsurp has arrived in the mail. You're excited. Let's go to the range and shoot it. No, stop. Before you do anything, stop. Milsurps aren't like your typical gun purchase, folks. And when you buy yourself a Milsurp, your standard of care goes up as a firearm owner. You need to double check these things. You need to go over them with a fine-tooth comb. And what you're quite often going to have to go through is called a process of, maintenance. And quite often troubleshooting. Let's be honest, when it comes to Milsurps, most of these guns, most of these rifles, frankly, they've been neglected. Okay? They've been treated hard, and they haven't necessarily seen the best standard of care from their previous handlers, owners, and so on. People just assume, oh, it's a mil-spec rifle, don't worry, it's tough and it was made to be able to do that. Well, no. No, it's much more complicated than that. And you got to go into a different standard of care when it comes to your assessment and your evaluation of the rifle before you take it out and start shooting it at the range. For example, this particular Canadian marked SMLE has probably in the neighborhood of around 10 years of accumulated copper fouling in the bore. I mean, it's been basically, I've been doing nothing but trying to remove copper from the inside of this bore over the last 3 days. What you see here is about 7 different applications of foaming bore cleaner. That is all copper that came out of that one rifle, the SMLE. And I figure that's at least 10 years of shooting Mark 7 copper jacketed projectiles, maybe even some Cooper nickel plated bullets. That's my foaming bore cleaner of choice. What you do is you go through this process, 7 applications of scrubbing and patching in between applications, and it can take up to an hour to 2 hours for each application to complete. So this isn't a slow process. I mean, this isn't a fast process. It's quite slow. It takes time. And you'll come out with, after an application, you'll come out with patches that kind of look like that with blue or green on it. And then you'll have a few more patches that look a little bit more like this. And what you're doing is you're cutting through rust and you're cutting through powder fouling in between copper layers. And I mean, that is a tremendous amount of copper. This bore was golden. I mean, it was just coppered up incredibly. The recoil must have been tremendous when they were shooting that rifle. And because you're trying to fit a bullet through a smaller hole, that can translate into recoil. So the shootability of the rifle is impacted when you get a rifle so badly coppered. And I'm thinking at least, 5 to 10 years of use, no real copper cutting solution was placed into that barrel. So it just accumulates and accumulates and builds and builds. And before you know it, you're starting to get chamber pressure spikes. Something to keep into consideration, for sure. So if I had taken this to the range and maybe even gone through a zeroing process before I had taken all that copper out of the bore, well, my zero wouldn't have reflected what the rifle is going to be shooting in its normal state so far as, the bore is concerned. I mean, you're going to zero it after you've removed all of the fouling, right? What if you slugged the bore and determined, okay, I need to run a cast pull at this diameter, and then you went out and purchased yourself a couple thousand bullets of lead cast bullets, but you slugged the bore when it was full of copper, so your readings are incorrect. So there's some things we need to take care of before we go out and start burning up other money. We got to make sure what we know about this rifle is true. Now let's just look at the stock. This thing has been sitting in pure boiled linseed oil for 3 days. And so many of the dents that were on this rifle, they've lifted. I mean, you can barely even tell there's a dent there now. You can see how the water is just kind of beating on the surface. And I haven't even started going through any kind of a real boiled linseed oil treatment on this stock yet. This is just basically straight oil that I'm putting into it. Just because the stock is dry. It needs to sit in oil to swell back up to where its normal position is. Already the trigger is starting to feel better. Different parts of the rifle feel different because I'm oiling the stock. Now let's stop and think about the rifle now. Let's just assume we're going to take it out to the range. We've totally decoppered the barrel, and I mean, this is what's going to happen later. But you fire the first shot out of the rifle. Now what? Well, truth of the matter is when you go through a process of having copper in a barrel for the amount of time that this rifle has had copper in the barrels, you're going to have rust. And there is a bit of a rust issue in the barrel of this rifle. It's not bad, but essentially what I'm trying to tell you is that when you start shooting this rifle at the range, you have to go through a break-in process, because each and every single one of those rounds is going to be burnishing and polishing that barrel. So for every shot, probably the first 5 to 10 rounds, I'm going to have to clean between each shot before that barrel starts to get burnished and stabilizes. It won't shoot perfectly for the first 10 rounds at least. And it's going to be a process that's going to continue for a little while. Almost like buying a brand new rifle, and you need to work on that barrel as a break-in process. Well, Milsurp is no different after you've actually removed all the copper fouling from the rifle. Right? You got to restore it. It's part of the restoration process. Milsurps are not your typical normal gun purchase for most people, and it does take a different standard of care before you can take this, or you should take this thing out to the range and start putting ammunition through it. Now, this video kind of ties two other videos that I put together in the past. One here on NRA bore condition, so you know how to properly evaluate bore condition. Another one here is basically Milsurp due diligence, a different video. Give those videos a watch. This video kind of ties them both in together. And the very last one, the very last video I'd like you to watch, is cleaning your bore. How important is it really? Give those videos a watch, and then that should pretty much tie everything up. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. Hope you're doing well as always. Maple Leaf up.